impact back home. Israeli forces have largely withdrawn from southern Gaza. The move comes 6 months after the Hamas attacks on October the 7th, marked yesterday, as Israel and Hamas have both now sent delegations to Cairo to join fresh ceasefire negotiations. Some are getting hopeful. But does that have an impact on whether or not we should still be selling arms to Israel? And indeed, that extraordinary poll we've seen suggesting that an extraordinarily large number of Muslims in this country support Hamas. Joining me right now to discuss all of this is co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Good afternoon to you, Aaron.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks so much for joining us. First of all, in terms of the IDF withdrawing from southern Gaza, you've been writing a lot about this and talking a lot about this in recent months. More aid getting in, certainly absolutely vital for civilians who have been left. We know people are starving as a massive big issue with the aid getting in. But with these negotiations starting in Cairo, both representatives of both sides going in, are you in any way more hopeful today than perhaps you might have been on Friday that we can see an end to this war?
I think hopeful is a strong word when you've had so much death on both sides. I'm optimistic in so much as I think as some kind of political solution is ultimately inevitable, and that does seem now to have dawned on the Israeli side. I mean, many Israelis I speak to, liberal Zionists, are perfectly clear that they think that Netanyahu is not the man to solve this. And there's building political pressure for him too. If you look at the domestic Israeli press, the Jerusalem Post, for instance, Haaretz, they really do have the knives out right now for the country's political leadership. So I think that twin dynamic of pressure on Netanyahu, potentially even maybe another government, although I think that is unlikely in the short term, and the necessity for a political solution, that does make me optimistic, that dynamic. And Netanyahu is a political creature. He will recognise, I think, the inevitability now of some kind of political solution, particularly given the pressure coming from the United States.
Well, I was going to say,
Pelosi.
A lot of this seemed to follow a phone call with Joe Biden, US President. We know there's no love lost between those two men and the pressure. But there's also pressure coming from the UK as well. We've had David Cameron, our Foreign Secretary, basically sort of wagging his finger, saying, our support is not unconditional. The same with America. Do you think that has focused minds?
100%. I mean, the UK exports of weapons to Israel are tiny. It's only about 1% of Israeli imports of weapons, I believe. Yeah, I mean, we do help service their F-35s, but apart from that, there's no real impact of the UK. It would be purely symbolic, and symbolism can matter, but it would be purely symbolic. With regards to the United States, it's a very different kettle of fish. You've got obviously the ongoing $14 billion aid deal between the US and Israel. Also, the Israelis are presently looking at, I think, an $18 billion deal to procure weapons, including F-15 fighter jets. So any kind of spanner in the works to that is a major problem for the Israeli military establishment. And whatever you see from the politicians, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, even Netanyahu, people at the top of the IDF, they think fundamentally in different ways. They are prone to long-termism in a way that elected politicians aren't. I mean, that's the case in countries right around the world. So I think, yes, the pressure coming from the US, particularly the statement from Nancy Pelosi recently, former most senior Democrat in the House of Congress, saying that she doesn't support, or she would like to see a suspension of US arms sales to Israel. Utterly extraordinary. I don't think anybody thought they could ever predict that.
And we know why a lot of that pressure has happened. A lot of this about is homegrown views, and again on the left, but also among growing Muslim communities in the West, in America and Britain. What do you make of the demands? We've seen a letter recently for us to stop from senior former Supreme Court judges and other lawyers calling for the UK to suspend arms sales to Israel, such as they are. As you said, they're absolutely tiny. It's actually less than 0.1%, for goodness sake. It's not significant, but it is symbolic, and it does send a message about the West's support for Israel. We've seen another letter actually since found by even more top legal minds saying the exact opposite. There isn't a legal argument under international law for us to do that. But what message does it send out while Israel are in a battle with a prescribed terrorist organisation, Hamas, that is using civilians in the way it is after just 6 months after that horrific massacre on October the 7th? What message would it send out, even symbolically, if Britain did say, we won't send you any arms, we are cutting you off, to make a statement to the world? Does that not give succour to the terrorists of Hamas?
Well, I think, this has really gained traction in the UK after 3 UK nationals were killed by the IDF. I personally cannot understand why anybody would oppose a suspension of weapons sales to Israel, even if just for a month. I find it absolutely extraordinary.
Well, I do. I oppose the suspension.
In 1847, there was a UK national whose house was burglarized in Athens. As a response, Palmerston, who was then the Foreign Secretary, ordered a blockade of the Athenian harbour for 2 months until he was compensated by the Greek government.
Okay.
Today, in 2024, we can have 3 UK nationals killed, no actual explanation given. And there hasn't been an explanation, Julia, given. And we do nothing. And I think in that case, if you're not even going to do the symbolism when 3 of your people die, I do find that somewhat extraordinary.
But that depends on whether or not we believe that the Israeli government went, yeah, there are 3 British nationals among other foreign workers, aid workers. Let's target them because of that, and we'll just do that because we can. I don't think anyone thinks that the Israeli armed forces, whether they think they are evil or acting for good, are stupid. Now, they said it was a mistake. They have apologised, including the president. I mean, this has been a disaster for them. Awful to think about PR when we're talking about human lives lost. But it's obviously not as important. But it has been a disaster for them internationally. There's no reason why they would have done this deliberately, callously and carelessly. This is a horrible mistake. We make mistakes in war. British forces have done that. American forces have done that. All forces do that. Why are we holding Israel to a higher account?
Well, I mean, the paper of record in Israel, Haaretz, would disagree with your analysis there. They were quite clear that the reason why this happened is because the IDF have operationally lost any control on the ground. That's Haaretz quoting an IDF source. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not sort of alleging this because it's something I'd like to believe. It's literally something that's being said in the Israeli press.
We know there are plenty of people in Israel, in the media in Israel, and in politics in Israel that oppose a lot of what the Netanyahu government is doing and the IDF forces. We know that, but that doesn't make it true.
Well, I'm quoting. I mean, I don't know what else I can do other than quote an Israeli news source. And what I would say is, if you put the boot on the other foot, if UK armed forces killed, 3 Israeli nationals, I'm pretty sure Netanyahu would have responded in an incredibly aggressive, assertive way. I think, our ambassador would have been kicked out of Tel Aviv by tea time. So, like I say,
I think depends whether we thought it was deliberate or not. That's the key thing. It depends whether we thought it was. This is the key thing. But anyway, in terms of where we are now, where we go, a lot of people would argue they want a negotiated settlement. You said there's going to be a political settlement to this. Undoubtedly, there will be some sort of settlement of some sort. I'm not sure where it comes from, though, when we know, Netanyahu's not really in favour of a 2-state solution, but we know for a fact that Hamas aren't in favour of a 2-state solution.